Reminder, there is a sign-up sheet up here, and so we're going to let DOE do their presentation, two different parts, and then we'll allow people to ask questions or speak, and then we'll move right from there into the Deal Center's presentation, and then allow some questions and all, and then we'll move right on into the Georgia Partnership presentation. So, good. So, Senator, would you mind asking prayer, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Heavenly Father, thank you again for this beautiful day. Thank you for the children of this great state, and thank you for all those that are invested in their future. God, please be with those that are going to be presenting today, and please open all of our ears and minds to all that they have to tell us about how we can do best by your children. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, sir. Well, as everybody knows here, everybody in Georgia's got a vested interest in what we're talking about, and everybody in Georgia knows how important this is. So I'm going to do a little prelude before we move on into the thing. So, you know, as Governor Kemp said back several weeks ago, there is no next year. We can't say it's going to be down the road. We also cannot say that it's a marathon. It's not a marathon. This is a 100-yard dash. We're behind times. We got to catch up. Every day that our children are not reading on grade level, we're losing another day. And we just got to have that. We've got a problem. You know, we know that through the statistics and all, that less than 50% of the students in the state of Georgia in the public school system are reading on grade level. And then we know that really just grew larger with the pandemic. So that's what the purpose is. We need for the DOE to tell us where they're at on this very, very important Bill 538 that Representative Ballard brought. We were so fortunate she brought forward for us. I'd also like to thank God for giving the legislature the vision to move forward with Senate Bill 211 and Representative Ballard for bringing 538 to our attention and us passing it and moving forward. It gave us a lot of guidance. It gave us some guardrails for the DOE to be moving forward with it, and we'd like to thank you for that. You know, we learned very fast that our reading scores were higher in 2013 than they were in 2019, and then you add the pandemic to it. That's what scares us, and it really does. And we talk about workforce development in Georgia, and we know that if we don't have educated people, we won't have a workforce. And that's just obviously critical to us. For me personally, this is very embarrassing. For me personally, you know, I can't believe that we're ranked behind Mississippi, behind Louisiana, behind a lot of other states. We're in number 40 some odd in the United States on children that are reading on grade level in the 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. I don't like that, and I don't think any of y'all in this room like that, and that's why it's important for us to make something happen and make it happen immediately. I understand local control. I understand that word, but the more I hear that word, the more I hate that word, because we have learned that local control kind of pushes the buck off on somebody else, and we can't depend on that anymore. You know, a very famous great American, Ronald Reagan, said, "Trust but verify." And I think that's what we have to do. We have to push it out, but we got to verify that it's getting done, and we got to verify that it's going to keep being done. You know, a very important bill that's pushing around now is the school choice bill. And everybody in this room now understands why school choice is catching so much momentum. Our children are products of public education. We're public education people. I'd love to see the public education just flourish and flourish, but if we don't get our school systems on the level where they need to be, parents need to have a choice. I'm not promoting that today, but I do support it heavily. I'd like to quote the chairman of the Literacy Council, Scott Johnson. He said, "This is Georgia's most solvable problem." He also said, "This may not be the most important thing in Georgia, but it's definitely in the top 3. Correct, sir? I don't know. You know, we get these lists of schools, and this is disheartening me too. And we need to know what DOE, Department of Education, is doing about it, helping us do about it. We got a list of the 25% lowest performing schools in the state of Georgia. And let me tell you some of these schools, because they're right there in your hometown. They're not just in one part of the state. Evans County, Claxton, Georgia, 4 schools, all 4 of them on the list. Bullitt County's got 3 schools on the list. Candler County's got 1. Chatham's got 30 schools on the list. Atlanta Fulton County school system, 58 schools on the list, in the lowest performing schools in the state of Georgia. Senator Sims is not here, but her hometown of Albany's got 15 and Muskogea's got 28. That's why we're here. We've got to grab this thing and we got to run with it. We got to push it, and we got to understand not what we are going to do next year, but what we're doing today. And I know that DOE has already talked about the literacy coaches and all, and I'd like for them to get more into that. We got some questions about that, and they started talking about the screeners, and we got some questions about that. So at this point in time, I would like to turn it over to Chairman Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couldn't have said it better myself. Appreciate your opening up for us. I think you covered everything very well. Just excited to have DOE here. Excited to have all the speakers here and the information we're going to get today. It's much needed as we are trying to get these literacy rates up in the state of Georgia. We've got a lot of good policy set in place, a lot of good ideas, but now we've got to start implementing those ideas and start getting those rates up. So excited about the work that's been done. We've got a lot more work to do, but grateful for everyone being here on a Friday afternoon after a busy week. Thank you all so much.
You want to start with the agenda? Start with the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'll start with our first speaker. We'll hear from the Department of Education.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate y'all being here today, and again, thank you for the opportunity to represent the DOE. Again, I'm State School Superintendent Woods, and so we're going to jump right into it. Again, one of the things that has been mentioned, CCRPI, again, College Career Readiness Performance Index, as we have looked at this over the years, and and I would just be honest, I mean, to keep doing what we've been doing is not very acceptable. I think we all agree with that. And as we've looked at the CCRPI, the intent is to say, how can we look at what our schools are doing, but how can they improve? And again, that means even from the highest to the lowest. We've got to see everyone, again, as I've always said, sliding to the right. Everybody has to continue to improve as they move forward, throughout this. Again, as you can see, Governor Kemp joined, both the DOE and TSG to announce further incentivization on the high demand, pathways as well. So again, that is now a part of our CCRPI. Just yesterday, I know we had within the House Education Committee, the ASFAB, and that readiness test was brought forward as far as giving our kids more affordability and accessibility to that. As we know, Georgia is really one of the highest states that we look at military readiness as far as actually having bases within the state of Georgia, but also looking at recruitment. So we're very pleased with that. But I think trying to look at in the past, when you look at what we're trying to address, the metrics necessarily have not changed with that, looking at content mastery, progression, progress, readiness, closing the gaps, and graduation rates. In the past, all we've basically had and what you've seen is just a number. And a number is something that can be very arbitrary. You have to have something in the area of context so that we can make the improvements that are necessary. When you look at the upgrade, and we've looked at this, all the 4 areas I mentioned are on a 100-point scale, so we have not changed that. But this is our report card. And I would submit to you that for all of us who have been to school, we never received just one grade for our report card. I think it's very important that we can know where we're performing well, where we're performing, or underperforming as we continue to move forward. And as we look at this, as we talk about schools, where they're at, what they're doing, you can have a number that says, okay, this is where you are at in content mastery. But it's equally important to see what is the progress that we know. for schools to know that they are on the right track to continue to improve, to continue to, move forward. And I would say it's equally important even for those schools that are high performing. Say that we have a school that is up here in the 90% range. Well, what we may find out is that some of the subgroups that they are involved with perhaps are underperforming. And it's just as important that every student has that opportunity to succeed as we move forward. And so as we look at this, looking at closing the gaps, all this is a cumulative, study that as you look at. And once again, what is our mission? Our mission is to improve the academic performance of each and every kid. That's what we want to see. But we have to have the tools, we have to have, the numbers and the data and context so that we can make that. And this is, something I'm very proud of. It is something that even I go back into the years that, probably back to 2010 and looking at this and looking at the various integrations of what we had during that time and looking at what is performance. I think about annual yearly progress when I was, in the 2000s. I mean, every single school was expected to be at 100% performance, or else there were consequences. And I'll be honest, that's a hard challenge to make, but we were working our way towards that. And I think that as we, continue to look at this, we want to make sure that all our schools are up here with performance, but it is equally important to recognize growth. One of the things this year, especially in the area of literacy, we've been out and we've been recognizing schools as far as literacy leaders. And we looked at two things. First of all, we looked at, who were the schools that were doing, very high on proficiency, at least 90% proficiency. So we recognized them. But also we wanted to recognize the schools that were making performance. And again, the metric we use is that did you score 15 points higher than you did the previous year? And so that growth marker is just as important as the proficiency marker so that we can balance. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, just the other day down in Savannah Chatham, which in one of the school systems you mentioned earlier, what we looked at is that their school board was able to take this information and say, okay, we're scoring well and we're proficient in these areas. But we noticed specifically that we need to improve in certain areas of proficient or in progress. And again, they were asking the superintendent, they're asking, individuals within the school system, what are we going to do about it and how are we going to address it? And so I think that as we look and we transition as a tool, yes, we are accountable. Yes, we have the metrics in place, but we have to put the information in context so that we can continue to improve as we move forward. Again, as we looked at, do we have a plan? Yes, we have a plan. Again, just the other day, Axios of Atlanta came out. We sat down and we went through, what we have looked at and what we believe are the proper steps to take as, excuse me, as we continue to move forward. This again is an information that you have with that really is a very good overview of what we have as far as the plans, what we're moving forward. And again, we can give you as much. And again, I know that many of you who are on the council have seen more in-depth information on this. But as we look at this, we talk about what is the plan for improving. And it does, excuse me, for those that are near me, I'm not contagious. So again, just to let you know, I don't want to, see everybody shift to the right in the room, in a sense. But it is the South Georgia crud that has followed me north. Thank you very much. But as we look at the, an overview and just trying to give you a sense of what are the steps that we are taking in the state of Georgia and specifically at the DOE. Since early on when we came in, I was charged by the State Board of Education to come up with a strategic plan. And that plan is involved to what we now have, or what we call our continuous improvement strategic plan. It is a model that is based really on the scientific method, again, looking at and evaluating and constantly improving. And we continuously look at the things that are being done so that we can, be very sensitive and react where we need to in a very timely manner. And we try to focus and make sure that we do focus on what are the things that we actually can control at the DOE. What are those touch points that we believe are very critical to the education of our children? And really, there's roughly about 5 areas that we step on and really look at doing a really robust attack on these areas. School climate is extremely important. And that's one of the things we look at, that our kids have to have an environment that allows them to learn. And one of the things that we look at, if you look at our continuous improvement model, we have a team called the Whole Child. Our kids have to have physical safety, they have to have nutrition safety, and they have to have mental wellness safety. And again, many of you know, again, one of the issues we looked at and really has been projected very heavily throughout the state, is the mental wellness of not only our students, but also our teacher staff as well, especially coming out of the pandemic. But those are areas in which we critically have to make sure that our schools are doing what they do. And I do appreciate, the things we've looked at, the $45,000 that has been proposed by the governor of school safety, the safety grants that you, again, collectively as members of the legislative body have approved over the past few years, doing some things to make sure that all our kids, can, have food and adequately, great service. Again, I'm pleased to work with Commissioner Tyler and making sure that, an ever-increasing growing amount of foods and services that appear in our school systems are Georgia grown. I think that's one of the things that's extremely important to do as well. And thinking about, again, mental wellness, and again, I know that you are looking at legislation and continue to approve or to improve our system of mental wellness for our kids. But also looking at standards. Standards, as we look at, and I know that's kind of a vague thing we do, but, simply said, it's what we expect our kids to know. And during this time, and when I came on board, we had something called Common Core, and that was something that was addressed throughout the United States of America. It was not unique to Georgia. And recently, again, what we've looked at is this year we have adopted new standards when it comes to math, and we've adopted new standards that come, in the area of reading and English language arts. And I would say that this, why is this important? Because if all we do is change some of the metrics, if all we do is move some things around, screeners, but if we do not address what our kids are expected to learn, we are not going to see the growth that we need to see. And how do we inspect them, to learn? One of the things in math, looking at, what we call discrete or traditional math, I'm glad to say that, we're giving our faculty and staff the ability to teach math the old-fashioned way. And, I think that's something that, was needed across the state. We're providing, a lot of detailed guidance so that our teachers are not having to search for what they're expected to learn on the internet. And that is one of the things when you look at both the math and the reading standards, that is something that we have in place, that we're giving that support, we're giving that strong direction within this. And I know Ms. Denty will speak very quickly on this, of how we've changed that, looking at phonemic awareness, looking at, recognizing words, looking at, traditionally, what, again, kind of bundled today in the science of reading. So I'm very excited about that. Professional learning and training. It's extremely important that our teachers know how to teach reading, how to make those decisions when they're working with kids on a one-on-one basis. And as we continue to move forward with that, as we look at the training, we have the Georgia Literacy Academy that is up and running. Roughly about 5,000 teachers are now voluntarily taking their time to look at modules. We're working with the Rollins Center to make sure that takes place. And so that is open not only to K-3 or kindergarten 3 teachers, but really to K-5. Because I think we have to understand, we have to make sure that as kids progress and as they learn, and it would be great if they were able to move at the same pace at the same time, but we know that there are differences in progressions of learning throughout the state. Sometimes that light bulb just doesn't come on at the same time. But we've got to recognize that, okay, if it's not coming on, we've got to be able to catch up and turn that light on for these students, as we continue to move forward. And so we're very excited about that. We're looking at, the the tiered coaching model. This is something I believe in. This is something that I had direct conversations with Kerry Wright, who was the former superintendent of Mississippi and now the interim superintendent of Maryland. And these were discussions that we've had and we've talked about. And again, this is what she has supported for us in Georgia. This is reflective in the governor's budget. And, and I believe in this model. I believe it is something that definitely can be done in a very timely manner to make sure that all our kids, are learning and progressing, at the appropriate rate. Again, there is no tomorrow, as was mentioned, and we've got to be able to move our kids forward and make sure that they are doing what they need to do. Looking at resources and supports, we've been charged to create a screener for all districts, something that is free. And so we are in the process of working with DRC, our vendor for Milestones, to make sure that that is in place. Once again, high quality. Again, anything less than high quality or exceptional is not acceptable. And so we're working with them to make sure that K-3 screener will be ready at the beginning of this upcoming school year. It will be one in which it is free. And so I hope that, we've seen a lot of interest in that, and we're working with schools and again, with looking at what we call Beacon, and again, is a formative assessment. So we have the groundwork that is there, what our schools are very familiar with what they look at. And again, looking at the formative assessment that picks up at grades K through 8 to make sure that our kids are on track as well. Again, it does, measurement does not stop at third grade. It has to continue to move forward, and again, I'm very excited about what that looks like. Accountability and and assessment. Again, the milestones will continue to be what we want it to be. I mean, it is our number one area of what we look, excuse me, look at as far as being accountable in the state. And making sure that our kids are on track. It is a summative, or at the end of the year, evaluation. But I think in conjunction with the screener that they're allowing those formative assessments during the course of the year, in conjunction with this, is definitely needed throughout the state. We tried and attempted, to work with the federal government to come up with a system in which we would have had a formative, assessment that would have been our accountability system. But unfortunately, the feds did not allow that to move forward. But this is something, again, as we look at the screener, can come into place very, very easy. Before we get to that, I do want to make just, one quick announcement. I'm pleased to say that what we'll be doing, and again, Senator, as you mentioned, that low is 25, is that we will now be putting in place, and this is even before any legislation, anything as far as the coaching model, and the funding we hope to be approved takes place, but we're going to put 60 literacy coaches in elementary schools in our lowest 5%. We are making sure that, like I said, working with our school improvement, team, Dr. Stephanie Johnson, and this, we believe, and we are going to invest. And we're going to go above and beyond to make sure that our schools are, up and ready with that. Also, in the coming days, we'll have a literacy dashboard. And it will give you a very transparent picture of what is taking place throughout the state of Georgia, down into the school level. And so I'll be glad to, like I said, when we push that forward and roll that out in the very near future, I think that will be something that we need for Georgia, and we'll be very supportive of what we hope to do. But at this time, I would like to bring up Miss Amy Denty. She will take you the rest of the way when it comes to literacy. When we talk about literacy and we talk about the importance, leadership is equally important. You have to have the right people in the right place to make sure it gets carried out. And I think in conjunction with Dr. April Aldridge, I'm pleased to say that Miss Amy Denty, is here. She is recognized throughout the state. There's not another person that I would say is more qualified in the state to lead this effort. So, Amy, I'm going to let you come and take us the rest of the way.
Thanks so much. Did I mess that up?
Nope.
You're good.
Okay, we're okay. Thank y'all for having us here this afternoon, and thank you for that kind introduction, Superintendent Woods. I would like to say that when I approach this work, I really approach this work from a teacher's lens. I'm proud to have spent the better part of my life in public education, and I know I've served as a teacher for a very long time, an instructional coach, assistant principal, curriculum director, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, and I wake up every day so thankful that I get to do this work now on behalf of the Department of Education and our state. But I still remember that where the magic really happens is in the classroom between a teacher and a child. And it's our job collectively to make sure that we're putting the things in place to support that teacher and that child in the classroom. And so I try to approach everything from that teacher lens and that teacher standpoint. And so that's where I'll be coming from today. So I want to start out, and I want to just show you two important models. Well, one's a model and one is a visual representation. And one is going to break things down very simply, and the other is going to show you that teaching reading is really the most complex thing we do in our schools today. So this, and I promise I won't have my little teacher hat on for too very long today, but this will be good for everybody in the room. So this is a model that was developed by Goff and Tumner way back a long time ago, 1986. And it's called, we're not trying to say that teaching reading is a simple thing, but they were trying to show the parity between word recognition and language comprehension and how important both of those things are to reach reading comprehension or skilled reading. And you can see that even though we're talking about literacy, that this is a multiplication problem. And so to get a product of one, to get a whole product, we can't have partial numbers in those beginning places. We need strong word recognition, strong language comprehension to reach reading comprehension. If those numbers decrease in either of those columns, you can see that we don't end up with a whole. And so that is a simple way to look at it. And now we're going to look at it's not a model, it's a visual representation that was developed by Dr. Hollis Scarborough back in 2001. And this is called Scarborough's Reading Rope. And over on the left, we have the lines directly from House Bill 538 that define the science of reading. And if you look carefully, you'll see a lot of commonality between that definition and what you see in the reading rope. I travel with my reading rope that I like to make out of graduation cords because I love the analogy or the metaphor that if we do a really great job of all of these things, then when our children are ready to graduate and are ready to walk across that stage or that stadium to grab that high school diploma, that they will be able to do so, and will be able to do so with the knowledge and skills that are going to let them make decisions for their life that will help them reach their full potential. That's a win for everybody, and it's certainly a win for our state. You'll see some commonalities here in the reading rope and the last simple view of reading that I showed you. So the bottom part of the reading rope is that word recognition part. Those are things like phonological awareness, decoding, sight recognition. Maybe not sight recognition as many of us remember it, but sight recognition of words. As those strands bind together, we want them to become increasingly automatic. The top part represents language comprehension, the other part of the simple view of reading. And you can see that that's made up of important strands like building background knowledge, vocabulary, syntax, semantics, those critical thinking skills that create that verbal reasoning strand, being able to draw conclusions, make inferences. All of those things have to bind together and really become increasingly strategic. We don't arrive on that top part of the reading rope. You and I still learn new vocabulary words every day. We still learn to think from different perspectives. And so that part continues happening. That learning continues happening. But when we can take both of those strands and wind them tightly, then we get a skilled reader. And that is what we're all here for, and that's what it's all about. And so I would like for you to just keep that in mind. Teaching reading is the most complex thing we do in our schools, and our teachers deserve all of our support to make that happen in schools. So this is a picture of the signing of House Bill 538, or the Georgia Early Literacy Act. And it's hard to believe, it's been 10 months. In some ways it's hard to believe, but a lot has happened in just 10 months, and a lot of hard work has been put into ensuring that school districts and the Department of Education and the Professional Standards Commission and everybody that's involved can do this work and can do it well to support our schools. And so let's just take a look at where we are with each of these important components. So as you know, there are 5 major components to the Georgia Early Literacy Act: instructional materials, universal screeners, targeted interventions, professional learning, and teacher preparation. And there are deadlines for each of these things, and I'll just take you through where we are on each of those different components. But first, I want to make sure that you're aware of our Aligning Literacy Policies and Practices document. This is a detailed guidance document that has been available to our school districts since early July. It's updated regularly, though, so it's not a static document. It provides information on all of the pieces of literacy policy and legislation that are affecting our school districts today. And it helps to unpack all of those requirements and connects those things together so that people can see the tight connections across all of the things that are happening. We've received really positive feedback from our stakeholders regarding this document, and so I would encourage you to take a look at it. Again, it's not static, it's updated regularly. Our last update was January 16th, I believe. Superintendent Woods showed you this and showed you a little bit of this infographic that we have that describes our literacy plan. And so our literacy plan at the department embeds all of the components of the Georgia Early Literacy Act. It also adds a plan for a statewide coaching model, and we're thrilled today to have been able to announce that that statewide coaching model will be expanded to include 60 coaches that will be placed directly in 60 elementary schools of high need, so that there will be a qualified literacy coach in those schools to work side by side with teachers and administrators as they're doing this hard and complex work of teaching children to read. Our plan leverages both national and state literacy leaders. I'll talk so much about our partnerships today throughout my opportunity to share with you. And we're really proud to be able to work with partners who care about this work as much as we do. Our plan also includes all of the major elements of Mississippi's literacy plan. Mississippi is getting a lot of good attention, and they should get a lot of good attention because they've done a lot of hard work. We're fortunate to also have relationships, in addition to Mississippi, with other states who are embarking on this same work. And so it's great to be able to learn from other states, to collaborate with them, to figure out great next steps. But of course, we're always keeping Georgia at the forefront of our mind. So let's take a look at where we are on the different requirements of the Georgia Early Literacy Act. So one of the first deadlines was that the State Board of Education was required to approve high-quality instructional materials. These are core instructional materials for teaching reading to students in grades K through 3. At the November State Board of Education meeting, they approved the first list. You can see that we have the GLASS logo below. That's the Georgia Language Arts Supervisors Association. And we partnered with GLASS to help conduct these important reviews. Each State Board of Education member was asked to appoint a committee member who had a background in early literacy, hopefully had taught children in grades K through 3. We also had 2 representatives appointed by the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, and we had 2 representatives from higher education. We were fortunate that really fabulous and talented and very professional group were willing to come back and continue to help us with reviews. Because this is resource adoption in school districts is such an important decision. It costs a lot of money. All vendors want to sell their product. There's just a lot of layers of decision-making that has to happen there. And because we wanted to be sure that we had cast a wide net and that vendors who believed they had high-quality instructional materials to offer had had every opportunity, and because we wanted to make sure we had a good and thorough list for districts before maybe the time period to spend ESSER dollars had been used up, we opted to do a second review very quickly. And so at the February board, we just completed that review earlier this week on Tuesday, as a matter of fact. And at the February board meeting, the Georgia Language Arts Supervisors Association will be bringing a second advisory list to the State Board of Education. So you'll want to be on the lookout for that. This slide shows a portion of our initial report. The graphic on the right shows the 8 core instructional resources that have been approved. And you can take a look at that report. It's posted at the literacy website, on the Godot website. But you can see the different areas that were reviewed, and those all match up with exactly what is required in the legislation. The graphic on the right is our literacy guidance rubric for vetting supplemental instructional materials. So, it is very rare in education to be able to adopt one core resource and have it meet all of the needs in a school system. That just doesn't happen. We have to use supplemental materials for a lot of things. For example, you might use a supplemental resource in your EIP classrooms. You might love everything about a core resource, except maybe you think the phonological awareness component isn't strong enough, and so you adopt a supplemental resource to ramp that up and to make sure that students are getting what they need to get. So we want districts to do a great job of selecting those supplemental resources. We don't want districts to not have anything to use to vet those supplemental resources, because those things are really important in instruction as well. And so we have provided guidance. We've also provided the rubric. The rubric is the same rubric that we use to vet the core materials, but of course in vetting supplemental materials, school districts would simply use the parts of the rubric that were applicable to the supplemental resource they were choosing. So we've provided that guidance to our school districts. So that is our HQIM. That stands for High Quality Instructional Materials work, and that work will of course be ongoing. It's nothing is really a one-stop shop anymore, and so that work will be ongoing. So the next component of the Georgia Early Literacy Act is universal screeners, and the law requires that by August 2024 that all students in grades K through 3 are screened with a universal screener 3 times a year, and typically we think of beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. And so the DOE was charged with establishing all of the qualifications and timelines and submission procedures for vendors to submit their screeners for consideration to be on the approved list. And by July 1st, 2024, the Department of Education was required to have the State Board of Education approve a list of universal screeners, and that we've done both of those things and reached both of those goals before the deadline. So, and we've also already published that list of screeners. Another thing that we're working hard on right now is the development of a free universal screener that our districts will be able to use, of course, free of charge. We're working with one of our assessment vendor partners, DRC, to establish a universal screener that will meet the requirements for both House Bill 538 and Senate Bill 48, which of course is what I call Georgia's dyslexia legislation. Dr. Jennifer Lindstrom and I have been fortunate to both be able to work closely with that vendor in the development of that universal screener. So, August 1st, 2024 is the date that districts are required to begin screening students. But you should know that many, many districts already use universal screeners and are already doing that work. And so this is not necessarily brand new to our districts. So a couple of things that also closely related to universal screeners is the third component, which is targeted interventions. And so the legislation requires that when students are found to have a significant reading deficiency, that they will have a reading intervention plan developed for them. And so that is closely related to the universal screeners, because the universal screeners are what helps to raise that red flag and to tell us that we need to look more carefully at this child to see how to close those gaps. So there are two resources that I want you to be sure and know about, and I know Dr. Morgan is going to talk to y'all in a few minutes, and so I won't steal her thunder. But on the left, you see Georgia's reading and dyslexia screening process flowchart. This is a guidance document that we've provided. I have to really brag on Dr. Jennifer Lindstrom. She worked very hard on this and got lots of feedback from many people to make sure that we had a good document. But this document will help schools, MTSS teams with the process for ensuring that students do get a good, solid reading intervention plan when they need it. We are working right now with our partners at the Serve Center to develop guidance for those reading intervention plans. And so we hope to have some additional guidance to release probably in the next couple of months. On the right, you see the cover page of the Deal Center's psychometric report of the screeners that are on Georgia's list. The Deal Center has been a fabulous partner in all things literacy. And one of the things that they did that has proved to be a great guidance document for our districts is a psychometric review of the 16 screeners. And so I know that Dr. Morgan is going to talk about that in a few minutes, and so I will let her tell you the details of that report. And so let me go back and say one thing. So the Georgia Council on Literacy, one of the recommendations in our November 30th report was for the State Board of Education to consider narrowing that list of universal screeners. And so that will be considered by our State Board of Education. So just be on the lookout for that as well. Just as a reminder, the free universal screener that we're working with DRC to develop right now will meet all of the requirements of House Bill 538 and all of the requirements of Senate Bill 48. And we believe that by streamlining this streamlines the testing of students. It saves the state and districts some money while providing valuable information to educators. And it also narrows the amount of assessment that we're having to do, because assessment is so important. We want to be data-driven in our decision-making, but we also have to have time to teach children, too. And so we've got to find the balance there. And we think that this, the free screener that is in development right now will help with that. So continuing on to our timeline and our things that are required, I talked a little bit about the tiered intervention plans. Those go into effect in tandem with the universal screeners August 1st of 2024. All of that is on track, and again, we'll be releasing some additional guidance. I'm going to jump back to instructional materials for just a moment, because December of 2024, remember, the state board had to approve a list in January of 2024. So in December of 2024, almost a year later, we will ask that all local boards of education have approved their high-quality instructional materials for teaching students in grades K through 3. And then on the 15th of December, we'll ask local boards to certify that their instructional materials do meet the standards of high-quality instructional materials as stated in the legislation. So, the next bucket is teacher preparation. I'm not going to talk a lot about teacher preparation because that's being handled by the Georgia Professional Standards Commission. I will say that they are hard at work on that and have reached out to various stakeholders throughout the state in that work. Professional learning for K through 3 teachers is already happening. It's so exciting to see this happening throughout the state. I love being invited to talk to teachers and to hear about what they're learning and how they're taking that learning and implementing what they've learned into their classrooms. And so the deadline for this is July 1st, 2025. Many of you know that we have launched the Georgia Literacy Academy. This is in partnership with the Rollins Center and Cox Campus, who have been wonderful partners in this work. We have taken the Rollins Center Cox Campus Structured Literacy for K through 3rd grade modules. There are 10 modules, which equals about 25 hours of online learning. And we have migrated those modules over to the Georgia Learns platform and created the Georgia Literacy Academy. We've already had well over 4,000, we're very close to the 5,000 mark, of teachers who have already enrolled and are taking advantage of these courses. In tandem with that, and also in partnership with the Rollins Center, we've had a year-long journey of knowledge building for school and district leaders that goes hand in hand with the modules that teachers are doing. In March, we will begin a similar process for our RESA leaders, and we have 10 school districts that are taking place in what we call our Rollins Center navigation cohorts. And that's a cohort, too, that supports leaders to be able to support this important work in the classroom. And so the professional learning part is really exciting. And again, though, to have strong professional learning and to have it take root, we have to make sure that there is a nice, tight bridge to practice, which I'll close with in just a moment. I want to talk about just a couple of other partnerships, or I want to talk a little bit more about the Rollins Center partnership. So you may have seen this article, I think this week, in the Atlanta Journal about Atlanta Public Schools seeks to achieve equity through their new literacy plan. And so we are very involved with the Rollins Center with their work in supporting the Atlanta Public Schools with this work. And we're also very involved in supporting all of our schools. And so sometimes in Georgia we talk about our metro schools and our rural schools, but this is something that's important to all of our schools. And so we're also really proud of the literacy efforts of the Department of Education's Office of Rural Education and Innovation. That's a mouthful. REI is what we call it for short. REI has trained over 2,300 educators in 15 different RESAs in intensive structured literacy training. And those are tiered trainings that include LETRS training, Orton Gillingham training, and Wilson Reading training, as well as training for school and district leaders. And so we're very proud of that work. We're also proud that we've been able to support teachers to get their dyslexia endorsements and their reading endorsements. That makes them stronger and gives them more tools in their toolbox as they work with students. Superintendent Woods talked a little bit about Georgia's new K-12 English Language Arts standards. These won't be implemented until the 25-26 school year, but we're already actively providing professional learning to our teachers and district and school leaders around these standards. The only part that I'm going to talk about today is a brand new domain, which is the Foundations domain. This is a domain that is designed for kindergarten through 5th grade, and it does exactly what you would expect it to do. It helps to build that strong foundation for building strong, skilled readers. I'm going to go ahead and populate all of this quickly. I went a little too far. So this is the Foundations domain. In green, you see the big ideas, and in blue, you see the main components of each of those big ideas. And so you see and you hear a lot of the same language that you hear in House Bill 538 or the Georgia Early Literacy Act. Each of the items that has a gold star beside it are items that are specifically listed in that legislation. Things like phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, alphabet knowledge. And so that Foundations domain is a new way of thinking, and it's a way to really focus building that strong foundation for reading success in grades K through 5. And so finally, I want to talk for just a moment. I know we've already talked a little bit about Georgia's statewide coaching model, but I want to talk for just a moment about this. Back in the fall, we had the opportunity to propose a tiered coaching model for our state to the governor's office. And it establishes regional literacy coaches, and it ensures that those regional coaches will have a point person at every district to work with, and it also leverages the people that we already have working in our local schools to be able to come together to do this work. And so really it does three things. It helps to align efforts and standardize the expectations at all of those levels. I'm a real believer in having a framework that everyone understands so that within their particular venue, they can make sure that the framework is you're holding firm to that framework. And so that's what this tiered coaching model helps to do. It also supports the entire state by growing capacity and leveraging people that are already in our schools doing hard work. But it's also going to let us prioritize and close gaps. The fact that we're able to, this first year, this is so exciting, this first year place 60 literacy coaches in our elementary schools of highest need is so exciting, and it's just going to move us forward faster. We're excited that Dr. Nick Philman is joining us as our structured literacy coaching coordinator, and that too is a partnership. It's a partnership with Marietta City Schools. And finally, this coaching model also allows us to use our resources efficiently and effectively, but it'll also allow us to be able to scale up in the future and as needed. So we're very excited about the coaching model. We know that professional learning without coaching doesn't really stick. And so you can do all the great professional learning in the world, but if you don't have a coaching component to really help teachers bridge what they learn to their practice, to what is happening in that elementary school classroom, then we don't get the impact from the professional learning that we had hoped. Dr. Carrie Wright is the former Mississippi State School Superintendent, and many of you may have seen her op-ed article that she wrote with Superintendent Woods. And she says that Georgia can increase early literacy rates by investing in a tiered statewide coaching model. And so we're excited that that was placed in Governor Kemp's proposed budget and are excited about being able to make this a reality. I just mentioned that Dr. Nick Philman from Marietta City. He's been a big part of the great work in Marietta City. He has joined us this year. We're in partnership with Marietta City, and he works some days for them, and he is already working some days for us in really helping to develop this plan. And he's going to be a great representative for our state as we build this strong coaching model. We also have a legislative priority that is closely related to literacy that would allow us to put quality reading teachers back into Georgia's classrooms. And this is part of trying to grow the reading teacher pipeline. And so what we're asking is to expand the return to work opportunity to include retired teachers who have a reading or a dyslexia endorsement, and to make that a high need area for the entire state. We have a lot of fabulous reading teachers that we could hopefully entice to come back and join us in this important work. And so that is one of our policy priorities this year. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to ask Shawana Coleman. Shawana, do you want to join me?
Can we ask a couple of questions before we go, so we can keep
Sure.
moving? Senator Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dealing with the CCRPI, and I mentioned it during budget week, and I appreciate the slide and kind of breaking that down. And I get, the thought process of breaking it out so you can see what areas you're weak in and attack those areas. But I still, as far as, looking at an overall school, I still think a single score is a better way to rate a school, and maybe have the 4 scores, in some other part of it, or a secondary thing. Just wanted to know more of the thought process of breaking that out. And then, and it's my understanding that per state law, that it's supposed to be a score, just one score from 0 to 100. And I know you mentioned that in your speech, that y'all still do that, and just wanted to know where that was and if that was posted with these scores.
Well, again, looking at the interpretation of what we looked at, we still have, everything is on a 0 to 100 scale. So from looking at that, I think that does meet, we believe we do meet the intent. I think it's very easy to look at each area. Again, I'm just trying to, look at, again, my thought processes with that. That with the CCRPI, we're looking at how do we identify where we're strong at, how do we identify where we're weak at. We've always referred to it as Georgia's report card. This is our school report card. And I think that in keeping with the 0 to 100, it's easy to see. I mean, I think when you look at it, it's easy if you want to just put all 4 scores together and divide by 400, if that's the number you want to look at. But my thought is that we're about school improvement. Well, I would say in this, we're about child improvement. And I think being able to break that out, and especially from just saying a single number that's out there, because as I shared, earlier in the presentation, I'm looking at, you may even still have a high-performing school, but there may be subgroups that are not being addressed. And I think that, that's, again, trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. And I think that is the impetus behind it. I would think that is the intent, of the legislation, was to say, let's put it all on the table for teachers, for administrators, but especially for our parents, for you as members of the General Assembly, that you can now take this and you can look at it across the band. So you can, I think, make a better informed decision. Is my school really performing well? And I think that even just looking at that one number, that if that's all you see, I guess my concern is that you would have a school that maybe look like it's underperforming. But if you look at the progress that is being made, that internally that there are some cultural things that have taken place, that it is moving in the right direction, I think, to be an encouragement. Senator, I would say that, even as I traveled around the state, gave out these literacy banners, the people that saw those, I think you were with me with one or two of those, but the ones that saw that, I think the most excitement was recognizing we're making progress. I mean, we want to, I mean, every school, and I shared with every school, I said, everybody wants to be at that 90%. There's no doubt about that. We want to have that, what we, I guess, qualify as an A. But I think the encouragement for those teachers and for that school said, listen, we're making progress. We're doing the right thing. And I think that helps them to even evaluate, are we doing the right thing? Because if not, something's got to change. So that's, again, my thoughts with that. We can have a further discussion with what that looks like. But that's, for me, is the rationale, behind it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And kind of the crux of me continuing to ask a question is, no hidden
Sure.
agenda here, but, I'm definitely pro school choice, hoping Senator Dolezal's bill ends up getting across the finish line this year, and just wanting to make sure it's an easy way to calculate those failing 25% of schools. So, giving those children a choice, and, hoping that, and the crux behind me being, so pro-school choice, is we live in a free market. I think if you've got, choice in schools, it's like looking at businesses, and if there's issues in a business and you're in a free market and somebody's going to do better than you and they're going to get more of the business, I think it'll help bring up all the schools. So breaking them out like that, I do see your point there.
Well, and to be honest, I think it, again, from the flip side, for any private school, or if you have a homeschool cluster, I hope they have a CCRPI. I hope it's something that I think everyone needs to be transparent about what's going on within every school. And I look forward, like I said, if we can support those schools on that, then we're glad to use. But I think we got a great model here, again, so that you as an individual, you as a parent, can make the best informed decision that you possibly can.
And then one other question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, dealing with the 60 literacy coaches, excited about that. Thank you all for implementing that. Would love to see it. I know it's in the bottom 5. Would love to see it in the bottom 25%. And just a curiosity question, as far as the funding for that, where did that come from if it wasn't asked for in the budget? And maybe I missed it.
Well, that's within our school improvement. So this is federal funds that we're looking at, because these are identified based on federal metrics. So we, again, we're committed to making sure our kids can read. And so we have prioritized that money and that funding to say, how do we raise the literacy rates of that bottom 5%? So again, those are federal numbers that we're using. And I'd love to say, yes, I want to increase and have that. But I will say this, that, when looking at, this is a 3-year commitment for our schools. So again, we will be there for 3 years and, and supporting them with that. And then whatever the list comes to look like, we're always going to have a bottom 25%. But I think hopefully we can determine what that bottom 25 looks like. And instead of somebody reading at 30%, I'd rather say all our schools are up here about 60, 70% at the bottom. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir, along that same lines, I've got a question along that same line, and I do appreciate it. But I'm also concerned about that 25%. And why do we choose 5% instead of 25%? I think what y'all have seen through this whole last couple of years, this legislature body is committed to improving schools. It's committed to improving literacy. And I think if y'all will come to us with some needs and some structured needs that we can look at and decide, I think the body is committed to that. So why do we choose 5% instead of 25%? Or why didn't we choose 10% instead of 15%?
Well, again, it goes back to federal requirements. Since this is federal money, those are, again, the identified schools that are, quote, typically is the list. And they choose 5%. Would I love to say 10%, 20%? And if you're willing, like I said, we can definitely get the numbers and say, this is what it would take to do for all 25%.
I think, Mr. Superintendent, I think we depend on y'all to tell us that.
Sure.
Y'all are the educators, y'all are the body, and it really disturbs me. I appreciate all this.
Sure.
But it really disturbs me that these numbers, we have not known, y'all have known these numbers for years now, and we are just putting these coaches in place now. That's very, very disturbing. So, but I do appreciate you doing them, but we're behind times on them.
Well, and I would say this, Senator, as well. When you look at this, what will we be spending it on? And I go back that we're looking at what did we expect our kids to learn? And I'd say that is the importance of our standards. Again, that is what we had to look at. And so for years, we were locked into the Common Core standards. It was not something I approved. It was not something I wanted. But, now we do have the mechanism there, and I think that, I really would wanted to spend good money after necessarily bad, because this requires time, it requires, getting our teachers trained. And I would say that, we need, help all the way across. With higher ed, I have not seen their plan or talked to the chancellor, but, we've got to have our workforce trained with that. And so we've got to align ourselves with their training model so that we know that how we're, can best address that. All I can say is that right now, I am completely committed to making sure our kids can read, but also that they can do math. Again, this is where I'm going, like I said, not just talking about one, but I'm talking about both within the staff. And they know we're here. I'm willing to listen. If we need to make changes, we need to make corrections. We'll be bringing more, items to you. We're, again, kind of looking at, I know the council is looking at a strategic plan. So I'm trying to make sure I'm not jumping too far ahead so that we can make sure that we're, completely aligned. And so we look forward to working with you and again with numbers. And like I said, we're excited about the days ahead. I appreciate the work and interest of each and every individual that has worked, has worked on this. And I can only say, for me personally, I am committed to work with each and every individual that's here. If you have questions, you have thoughts, you have concerns, you have criticisms, we'll be glad to take that and move forward for the betterment of our kids.
Well, again, we're working right now on an amended budget. Won't be long, we'll be working on the 25 budget. You got some time to get some numbers back to us.
Yes, sir. I think we have a meeting together, I believe, the 21st.
21st,
So,
yeah.
okay.
Yes, sir. Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent Woods, and thank y'all for your testimony. I did, just kind of what Superintendent Woods said, it isn't just about school improvement, but it's about child improvement, and I couldn't agree with you more on that. And to me, as somebody who worked with parents and kids for 30 years, as behavioral issues as juvenile probation officer. But my questioning goes back to, because I always, as that, I'm teaching not literacy, but discipline more so that with kids, but I always try to get the parents to buy in. Mm-hmm. And are we, or how do we bring parents into the matrix as contributors to their child's early reading? Because I know that is a huge obstacle for many of the kids. They're just coming from homes that reading's not an important issue to mm-hmm. some parents. I mean, so that they're not getting that at home. And I just truly believe all education begins at home before it comes to you. They've got to have that foundation, or at least reinforcement in the home. So are we reaching out to parents and bringing them into this to be part of this matrix to improve child literacy?
Very much so. I think, Senator, as you look, and again, for an individual who's been around school for many years, if parents are going to show up to open house and attend things, typically it's going to be in that K-5 area. And I would say even pre-K area. So as we look at involving parents, and again, even during the pandemic, we provided resources that would aid them in the instruction of their kids. So it is our intent that we make sure that we will, continue to provide instructional materials, instructional methods, and content being made available to all our parents throughout the state. And once again, our resources, I look at this as I'm not just targeting public education. If you're homeschool, if you're private school, our resources are your resources. Now, I think that as we look at moving forward in the future, and again, this is just superintendent, talking, I would love to see that there is some type of reading material at every hospital when every child is born, that they are informed about the importance of reading, going forward. Every time they see a pediatrician, a dentist, individuals that even hit us, or hit them before they even get to us. Those are discussions we have to, have, talking to our parents about to get them trained, because we know the information that, if kids are not at a reading level, by the time they get into third grade, or if they don't have a working vocabulary by the time they get to kindergarten, that's going to be very problematic, and that means we are catching up. So, this is a very comprehensive program. I think as we look at, what pre-K, again, why do we have individuals that are waiting on a waiting list in pre-K? We need those individuals in school. We need to make sure that pre-K, and again, I've not had a talk with the commissioner in a sense, but are your standards, again, aligned with our standards? Is it, does it include the science of reading? Because we all have to be on the same page. And that's from birth all the way through higher ed. And, because, at higher ed, their workforce, their students become our workforce. So it is very comprehensive, but yes, we are involved, parents, day in and day out with that and trying to encourage them.
Almost like training the trainer is what I guess I'm getting at. Are we
Yeah.
trying to do that? I know it's not your jobs
Yeah.
to train parents, but I just, that's what I felt like as a probation officer.
Yes, sir.
A lot of times a lot of the comments and discussions in my office were more for the parent than they were
Yeah.
for the child, just in regards to try to train them how to.
Well, I think once, we look at that, whether you're looking at CCRPI, whether you're looking at milestones, we are working to provide our parents, once they get that information, this is what we see. And hopefully those are dialogues that they can have at the local level, but we will provide resources at the state level as much as we possibly can to say, hey, these are areas that if you want to be that parent teacher, hey, we want to do that. Because we know that, our generation, we had parents that were at home, they were reading to us, they were doing things. This is different challenges.
Well, I know.
Most time, I see kids on this. And, if they're busy playing games instead of, doing something constructive like reading it, it makes it a little bit of a challenge.
All right, thank you.
Senator Howard.
Yes, thank you. I love this pyramid because it's so comprehensive, starting at the classroom, going to the district, going to the regional, you identify, you implement solutions, you evaluate. I love that comprehensiveness. I'm wondering if the various kinds of charter schools that we find across the state, are they included in this classroom analysis and the additional resources as scope? Are we making sure that they're using evidence-based curriculums? Are they included in this wonderful comprehensive approach?
If it's in a state charter, yes. If they're taking milestones, yes. So anything that is directly connected to us at the DOE and we are responsible for, the expectation is that they will succeed and they will follow the same guidance that we have.
And they'll get the same resources?
They will have
and-
everything the
Does-
same resources, yes.
Does that include the virtual charter programs?
Every school. Again, if
Okay,
it
good.
touches a Georgia public education child, then there is no exception to the rule.
Excellent, thank
Okay.
you.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent. Just looking at stats, the U.S. Department of Education, so I guess we can kind of take that as a whole. As a state in our country, we also are in the bottom 25% of all U.S. states in literacy. In simple terms, what metric are you using to gauge literacy? And with these changes, if everything is implemented, at what point are you going to claim success, and when are we going to start moving that needle to get our state out of the bottom 25%?
Well, I think there's a couple different metrics about how the feds approach this and versus, perhaps us as a state. We have adopted, the State Board of Education has adopted Lexile. Lexile is a reading metric that is recognized universally as the method in which, we can effectively calculate reading performance. When you look at, the feds, and again, I'm just making an assumption here. If I'm mistaken, please correct me. We're looking at the NAEP. Now, with our test, we test every single child. With the NAEP, it is basically a survey. When you look at the NAEP as well, I think we're 32nd. So we're at our reading is 30, I guess recognized as 32, proficiency. That being said, we're at the national average. So again, when you look across the board, that is there. Now, is that acceptable? I would say definitely not. When you look at saying, well, what would be acceptable as far as looking at the NAEP? Well, we're 11 points behind the high state, and that's Massachusetts. Okay, their NAEP score is 43. If you look at them throughout the years, they may have reached, and again, I'm going probably back 20 years, they may have reached about 50 around there at a high point. Now, everyone took a hit during COVID. That was something where you see the numbers and we had some advantages. So I think it is trying to look at the metric. When you're looking at saying, are we ever going to get to 90% on the NAEP? the numbers don't verify that, just because of what we have. So again, I'm just telling you, this is the context of what's there. There roughly are about 6 states that I think they're recognized as high or proficient with that, but we're not far from there. So how do we measure success? How do we know that we're getting there? I think we do perform better on the NAEP. I think that is reasonable to ask, but you will not see a lot of great growth there just because of the nature of the test. So when you have a 1 or 2 or maybe even a 3-point move, that's pretty significant, for any year that you have. But it is something, again, that is a survey, and it's hard to necessarily, track a cohort each year and each year and out. That's where I think with the milestones, we do have the Lexile. There's a very good metric that is out there. In fact, 20-something states actually use that as their reading metric that's there. For us, we're looking probably between 60 and 70% are looking at proficiency as we continue to grow. So, each year as we look at, I think we have to look at what is that cohort? Where do they start in 3rd grade and where do they end up by the time they graduate? But also across the grade band, are we seeing that growth continuously each year? So our big metrics would be both NAEP and would be the Lexile score based on milestone performance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. Mr. Superintendent, you will know a lot of our superintendents across the state are really catching a lot of slack now because all these reading scores are hitting the news or in the paper, they're into things. So the more we can push this and the faster we can push it, probably the more we can save these people jobs, so they are coming under a lot of heat, and probably deservedly so.
Yeah.
So, Shawana?
Awesome. So since we're talking about literacy, Georgia Reading Corps is a program that has partnered with the Department of Education to offer services to the school districts across the state of Georgia. We have been in the state of Georgia since 2018 with Math Corps, but once the literacy piece came on board, where we were looking at what does this mean for the state of Georgia and how can we add some depth to what's happening around literacy in the reading scores here with the state of Georgia. So the Department of Education partnered with us. As many of you know, I've spoken before this committee last year when we were talking about the state appropriated funding that the program already had, and the Department of Education decided to expand Reading Corps across the state of Georgia. So what does that look like now? We are in 9 districts with Reading Corps program in 74 schools and have placed 135 tutors. Our programs actually, what you all have been talking about, let's not just put everything on the educators inside of the classroom, but how can we also bring the community into this to make sure that our students are getting everything that they need from every different direction. And so we place AmeriCorps members into schools and we give them intensive training on our Reading Corps program that focuses on those foundational skills. We work directly with the internal coaches that are inside of the school buildings to identify the students that have some deficiencies. We look at those deficiencies, we look at their assessment scores from that side of things, and then we give them an assessment as well to determine where should they start in our scope and sequence. So we are not taking over the role for those educators in the classrooms. We are merely supporting all of the work that they are doing and ensuring that those students, they're getting K through 3, getting 20 minutes of tutoring each day, Monday through Friday, from their tutors that is helping them to build their confidence in reading, helping them to understand those standards that they may have some deficiencies in, and allowing them to be able to go back inside of their classrooms, be more confident, and know that they have the support that they need outside of the classroom as well to help them move forward. And so with that, it is data-driven, it's research-based, and we have had plenty of research around it that shows that this is something that actually works for the students across different planes. So it doesn't matter what their background is, if they're rural or if they are from the inner city schools. We are working inside of every district, every type of district that you can speak of, and some of the ones that you did speak of, such as Muskogee County, that are using our services, and Daugherty County school system that you spoke of as well, that are using our services in different manners. Our impact through those tutors that are being placed from AmeriCorps, we are training them on the program. They are also receiving support from our coaches, which shows that tiered coaching model as well. Our coaches are inside of the schools with them. They are ensuring that the programs are being implemented with fidelity, and they're consistently doing fidelity checks with them, taking the data that we're getting from these students with their benchmark assessments that are happening and working directly alongside those internal coaches from the schools to ensure that the students are continuing along the pathway to be able to see that improvement that's there. And what I can say is, with this partnership that started, we started placing tutors in October of 2023 inside of school systems. We placed another cohort of tutors in January of this year. So far, we have seen that the students that have been participating in Reading Core, about 60% of those students have been seeing improvement in their reading. And if at any point in time that they meet and exceed where they should be on the scale, then they are, of course, exited out of the program, but we continue to benchmark them throughout the year to ensure that they have not had any new deficiencies that have come up, or if they need to come back into the program, then they are coming back into the program. I think the clicker, oh, there it is. I have it. And so it expands along the depth of everything that Godot is intending to do as well, because we're also partnering with Georgia Professional Standards Commission, because we found that a lot of the tutors are also interested in careers in education. And so the school districts are also getting a double dosage. They're having these tutors inside of their school buildings. They're helping in literacy and in mathematics, and they are also getting that on-the-job training and on-the-job experiences, because they're getting these education awards that they can use as well in order to place back into the education system from the university side over here in the state of Georgia as well, and go to school and get licenses in education. And so with Georgia Professional Standards Commission, they're also coming in and doing professional development with our tutors to talk to them about what does it look like post your service in AmeriCorps, and how can you get into the school system if you already have a degree. What does that look like? We also brought on the different RESAs from different regions that we're already partnering in, and they've been talking to them as well. So the program brings depth from all across the different regions, and it has been a very successful partnership so far with the Department of Education. And we are excited to say that we are also going to be expanding even more this upcoming fall, and school districts are already signing on to bring tutors back into their buildings for next year, and new districts are having the opportunity to be able to bring Reading Core tutors into their school systems as well.
Thank you. We have some legislators in the room. Do y'all have any questions? Well, we do appreciate y'all being here. Thank y'all so much. We'll hang, please, yeah, no, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Senator, which one are you? Four.
I appreciate AmeriCorps. I appreciate your partnership. Thank you very much. I think the challenge is, how many school districts do we have in the state, Mr. Superintendent?
181, a little over 200.
A little over 200, so, yeah.
Long ways to go.
So, and how many schools?
2,300.
And how many tutors?
How many tutors?
Yes. From AmeriCorps, I see 135, which I appreciate. Thank you. And I know that's expanding and growing. I'm just looking at scale.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just looking at scale, okay? And I want to go back quickly to coaches. If we could talk a little bit about the coaching proposal, which is very, again, like AmeriCorps, it's a piece of the puzzle, right?
Sure. Yes,
It's an essential component. And I want to just tease out a little bit. We have 60, correct, at this point? 60 coaches?
We are adding 60 coaches.
We're adding, so we don't have any today.
No, sir, we do. There are a number of coaches already in our schools. I don't have those numbers at my fingertips.
Is it a dozen?
No, sir, it's more like 3,000. I mean, but this is a difficult thing to quantify, but we have about 300 literacy coaches that are coded on our CPI report as literacy coaches. There are other ways to code coaches that are in schools. Some coaches are coded as instructional coaches, and that might mean that they're working with multiple content areas. They might be working with math, science, social studies, language arts, literacy. And so it just depends, but part of our coaching model is to leverage those people who are already in place and bring them into that structured framework with common expectations.
Right, and I'm glad to hear that. 3,000 is a lot better than a smaller number, especially considering how many classrooms, how many schools we have out there. Now, going back to Superintendent Woods' comment about the use of federal funds to facilitate this approach.
Yes, sir.
That program doesn't enable the current coaches, the 3,000-ish, whatever it might be. That's a different concept, a different
Yes, sir.
orientation.
Yes, sir. Yeah. This is, again, when we receive from the federal government, they have, two sets of federally identified schools that are underperforming.
Right.
And typically they cap it at 5%. So that's what they send us the money
For the
for.
federal dollars, that's our target.
Yes.
Yeah, so that the lowest 5% are the ones that'll get that
Yep.
resource, is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And then, and we're saying 60, or is there gonna be more, or what's gonna be the 24, 25 rollout concept?
Well, I mean, those will be right now, we have identified, where, I guess we have our federally identified list.
Right.
So we are committed to be with those schools for the next 3 years. So these coaches, or 60, will be embedded within those specific schools for the next 3 years.
But that 60, is that the only schools that these coaches will be engaged in, or there will be additional schools that would participate?
Well, we potentially could, but I'd have to look at I guess, federal guidelines
Federal
about.
guidelines, so 5% right now identifies 60 schools, is that
60,
right?
yes, sir. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And of course, that does not include, again, the proposal and the budget would begin to expand that. So that's, using state dollars.
And to amplify the chairman's comments, tell us what you need,
Okay.
and let us see what we can do.
All right, we have, again, a meeting on the 21st, so we'll be glad to do that.
Yes, Senator, along those lines, I did a survey of First District RESA, 18 schools, 14 replied to the survey, one literacy coach out of 14 schools.
14 schools.
Yeah,
And that was in First District recently.
that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I would just like to close with this, again, to the committee. I'm committed to work with everyone. There is, like I said, my only interest is in the students of Georgia. And I would say that, we hear a lot about maybe being data-driven, but I think it's better that we could say that we are student-driven, but data-informed. And, we want to make sure that all of our kids can read. Like I said, it does not matter which. I'm committed to do that. I'm committed to work. And if you want to talk, if you want to meet, you have concerns, all you do, just reach out, and I will meet anytime, any place, anywhere. So, but I do thank you again for your commitment to literacy, to doing what we're doing. Please do not forget about numeracy. It is equally important that our kids can also do ABCs, but also 1, 2, 3s, okay? So again, thank you again for your time. If I could be of any assistance or my staff, let us know.
Thank you, thank y'all. Dr. Lindy Morgan, looking forward to, thank you, man.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting us to come today. We so appreciate the invitation and are so thankful that we get to share the good work that's happening at the Dill Center. I am Dr. Holly Roberts. I am the Associate Provost for Academic Affairs and Director of the Graduate School at Georgia College and State University. I'm just going to give a short opening just to remind us and orient us about the Dill Center, but Dr. Lindy Morgan, our Executive Director for the Dill Center and member of the Georgia Literacy Council, will then identify and talk about the 3 items that are on the agenda. And we're going to try to do our best to stay in our time frame. Clicker. Okay. So the center, the Sandra Dunnigan Dill Center of Early Language and Literacy is situated on our college campus in Milledgeville, Georgia College and State University. It was founded in 2017 under the leadership of Governor Nathan Deal, and it was a special funding initiative of the legislature. And it was named after First Lady Sandra Dunnigan Deal to commemorate and honor the work she has done in literacy across the state. Our vision is to create a Georgia where everyone has the tools they need to support children on the path to literacy. So we know that language development is a precursor to literacy, strong literacy skills. And so our mission is to ensure that every child meets their potential through advancing research in language and literacy practices throughout the state of Georgia. And we do have a statewide mission. We enact that mission through many stakeholders. As we were saying earlier, it just can't happen in the school. It happens at birth, and we know from birth to age 8, which is our focus at the Deal Center, it requires a lot of team members and stakeholders. So we support any child-facing adults, and how they can support literacy. And as I said, we believe that this begins at birth, and so lifelong success begins with a strong foundation. And so our quest is to translate research and literacy policy into practice by embedding evidence-based practices, which we hear a lot about, for early language and literacy development through the research we provide, community resources, and also through our professional learning. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Lindy Morgan to talk about the 3 items on the agenda. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. And I want to thank Amy Denty, because some of the things I was going to say, she already filled you in on, so I can be brief in some respect. So the first thing I was asked to speak about is the psychometric review that we completed regarding the universal reading screeners that were approved by the State Board of Education in July. Amy went over the requirements of those screeners, and what we did was at the request of the Literacy Council was to examine the psychometric properties of each of the screeners in order to compare their relative strengths and weaknesses. And as a result, old eyes. As a result, the intent of our review was to provide districts additional context as they select the most appropriate screener for the students that they serve. And I should click ahead as well. Our review process, we gathered multiple sources of information to evaluate the screeners. Prior to screener approval, the Georgia Department of Education engaged in a request for information process, and that began last May, where vendors were required to include evidence in several areas, including how their screener addresses the requirements in House Bill 538. The DOE shared this information with us. In addition, we located any peer-reviewed papers that we could find with regard to the screeners. And finally, we utilized the National Center for Intensive Interventions website to gather information as well. The NCII and their technical review committees have expertise in psychometrics, and they provide rigorous assessment of tools. And they evaluated 11 of the 16 screeners that are on the approved list. As we compiled all the information available to us, we prepared tables to summarize this information. Here's an example of one of those tables. Might be a little tricky to read, but basically it summarizes information on how these tools are administered and the training required to do so. We examined what domains each screener was designed to assess within those 2 broad categories of foundational literacy skills and characteristics of dyslexia. And we examined what grades the tool was both intended for, as well as the grades the tool showed convincing evidence for. And finally, most importantly, we assessed 4 primary psychometric features. And as each of these constructs could be described in great detail, I'm just going to summarize super briefly. Reliability gives us an index of whether a screener will produce consistent results over time. So regardless of when it's administered or who administers it. So it gives us a sense of stability of the scores that we derive. Validity is an index of how accurately and precisely a screener measures what it purports to measure. So are these tools really getting at the elements of early literacy development? And then we have sensitivity and specificity. Both of these have to do with how well a tool correctly identifies students in need of additional instructional support. So those students that would receive those reading interventions. Sensitivity is an index of a screener's accuracy in identifying students who are at risk. And specificity is the flip side of that in terms of identifying students or ruling out students who are not at risk. And so for a tool, you need both of these basically to work in tandem. Sometimes a tool is high in one and low in the other, and vice versa. If a tool is low in both of those areas, we should be particularly concerned. Beyond that, we derived a simple coding system in order to consider all of the evidence available to us. We ascribed weighted points for each area to derive a total score such that the tools could be considered relative to one another. And on the next slide that I'm going to show you is the actual relative screener rankings. But as I transition to that, I want to say that because this is not a standard coding, full differences in the individual scores for tests that clustered together. So we're just reporting those in terms of the three clusters of strong, moderate, and weak. And, a number of the screeners are strong at specific grades, but not others. Some of the tools were particularly weak at kindergarten. And, some of the screeners didn't include all of the domains. Most included most of those. We do not know, why certain developers of screeners didn't have a full assessment of domains. And third, our expectations for what is acceptable or a strong metric is going to vary across publishers. And they are obviously in the business of selling their product, so they may default to less rigorous metrics when reporting on their tool. So our review applied the most stringent evaluation metrics of these tools. I apologize, I didn't show you that. Okay. I do have to.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yes, sir. I didn't intend to.
Yeah. Just
And there, in your handout, senators, there's a one-pager that shows that.
So that's y'all's recommendation. The strong ones are y'all's recommendations of the best of these screeners. That's like an A, B, and a C type deal.
You could categorize it that way. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Few limitations. The Deal Center.
Back up and say, on the strong there was 8.
There were 8.
On the moderate was 5. On the weak was 3. So we don't need 16.
16 is an extensive number of screeners.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ma'am?
Number 10.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had heard that you couldn't accurately compare results across screeners. Is that the
That's
case?
absolutely true, which is, creates a significant problem the more screeners we have. Ideally, as in North Carolina, they selected one screener, and there were probably a number of challenges with that. However, when you have multiple screeners, it does not allow you to compare children across districts. So, yeah.
Why do we have 16?
That would be a question for the Department of Education and the State Board of Education.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's apples and oranges.
It's apples and oranges, absolutely. So I want to be transparent in our limitations. We received the charge to begin this work in the second week of August, and we completed it by October. So there's a challenge of working to do a rigorous review in a very short amount of time. Typically, this would be something that would take many, many months. So we did the best we could in a very short of time. So we relied on information provided to us and did the best we could with put some inconsistencies in reporting with what we found with NCII and then what was provided to DOE. Related to our time limitations, the review could not be considered as comprehensive. I would say it was more broad-based. It includes a lot of detail, but it wasn't conducted with the specificity and rigor that would be expected of a full-scale psychometric evaluation. So as a result of that, some of the nuance would be lost. Just quickly, a few takeaways. There were 8 screeners that were identified that came out on the top. This was done following the review by the State Board of Education of the broader set of screeners. We ranked from strong, moderate to weak, and we need to consider this within the context and as a relative only to one another. That is, we don't have information about the screeners that did not make the list. And the review was conducted as a broad-based synopsis. So we hope it's useful in indicating that there are a number of strong tools that have been selected by Georgia DOE and the State Board of Education. We'd encourage school administrators to consider which tools might be best suited for the students they serve. And the administration of selected tools in conjunction with utilization of the data they generate to provide targeted interventions for students in need of additional support should lead to greater number of students in our states meeting the benchmark for proficiency. And the full report can be viewed at that link. Next, I've been asked to report on a district inventory that is currently underway to evaluate as a baseline district progress toward implementation of House Bill 538. The purpose of the inventory, as I said, is to collect baseline data. This is a collaborative effort between the Deal Center, GOSA, the Literacy Council, and the Department of Education. We are going to use the information that we glean from this survey to provide a critical update to the council to determine areas of need and to hopefully inform statewide allocation of resources. So as Amy provided the overview of the elements of House Bill 538 and what DOE is doing to accomplish those, this tool that we have out currently is looking exactly at those 4 indicators. So we'll be asking districts whether they've selected universal screeners. If so, which one? If not, what is your plan? And so on and so forth regarding high-quality instructional materials, tiered interventions, and their approach to providing teachers professional learning. And within that, we're also asking about the coaches who in your district have been identified as literacy coaches, and more importantly, importantly as well, how have those coaches been trained?
And when will that be available?
Did you just read my next slide?
Oh.
No, the inventory will close on March 1st. Preliminary results will be available mid-March. We are going to work as quickly and accurately as we possibly can to share that information with the council, with GOSA, with DOE, and with policymakers and relevant stakeholders. Okay? So I'm going to move forward into my final topic. Because literacy coaching is a critical component of successful implementation of House Bill 538, I was asked to report on effective literacy coaching. I'd first like to offer this definition of a literacy coach: an instructional leader with specialized knowledge in the science of reading, evidence-based practices, English language arts, state standards, as well as the knowledge of how to work with educators as adult learners. Coach provides collegial job-embedded support to ensure that literacy instruction is data-informed and student-centered. Coaches accomplish this by collaborating with leaders and teachers engaging in practices such as co-teaching, co-planning, modeling, reflective conversations, and data chats. And there's a link here to this definition, which has been created by the Florida Department of Education in partnership with the Florida Center for Reading Research. So the big question is literacy coaching effective? It is absolutely a critical component of supporting teachers in mastering the teaching of reading. Literacy coaching has been a common denominator, part of the secret sauce, if you will, in successful reform in other states. And there's a large body of research that clearly indicates that coaching is one of the best forms of job-embedded professional learning. Coaching has been shown to influence teacher practice and to produce improved student outcomes. One thing that we need to understand in terms of the deployment of coaches statewide is that coaching effects will diminish as the number of teachers they coach increases. That is, fewer is better. In sum, coaching is critical, and it's effective overall. However, there's not one specified effective coaching model. The more that coaches can focus on supporting teachers in a few consistent areas of need identified by data, the more successful that they will be. I'm delighted that DOE presented their coaching overarching plan, but there are a number of devil in the details that we need to consider. And these are pulled directly from the knowledge base that we have on coaching. First, principal coach partnership agreements. These specify the duties of the coach and how the principal will provide support. These may include elimination of non-instructional duties or establishing criteria for who the coach works with during the school year. Relationship building is absolutely essential. Coaches have to have that special capacity to balance both being responsive to the teachers they work with, but also a little bit directive as well. They need to be able to share data, and there need to be open lines of communication between the teachers they work with and the principal that they serve under. Virtual coaching is on here and could be considered as a cost-saving strategy. There's preliminary evidence that it does have efficacy as well, that provides for less travel, the ability to work with greater numbers of teachers. Coach the coaches or train the trainer models. There's currently not a model for how to do this. We know that several states have deployed tiered coaching plans, but this has not been tested in terms of efficacy. So this is an important area to consider, and whoever supervises that coach needs to understand the role of literacy coaches and believe that it can have a positive outcome on teachers and students. We also need to establish training expectations for coaches, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that shortly. On the right are listed 4 coaching practices that have been associated with greater improvement in teacher delivery of content as well as student outcomes, and these have been mentioned previously. Coaches working alongside teachers with lesson planning. They're modeling, they're doing co-teaching. They're working with their teachers to engage in reflective conversations, and they're engaging in data chats. So when we talk about deploying coaches, we need to be asking, what does a coach need to know? Because just giving someone that label doesn't necessarily enable them to do the job effectively. So as Georgia begins to decide its state literacy coaching plan, it's essential that training expectations are established for coaches and for facilitators at all levels. The Florida Center for Reading Research, the University of Florida Lastinger Center, and the Florida Department of Education have taken the lead on this. They've collaborated to establish standards for literacy coaches. These are the main areas of standards highlighted here. So this is a sampling of what a state may consider in selecting and training our coaches. And then one additional possibility is for Georgia to consider creating a literacy coaching endorsement. Again, Florida's taken the lead on this, and to my knowledge, they are currently the only state with a professional certification in this area. However, I anticipate that that will change rather quickly. The Florida Center for Reading Research is actually creating a national literacy coaching course that incorporates those standards that I showed previously. This is going to be released by Excel in Ed in this summer, and so that might be something for the state to look at. So in sum, the Deal Center is here to help. Our role is to advance research in language and literacy, to guide, support policy development and implementation, and we want to continue to collaborate with all of our state agencies. I can open it up for questions.
Any questions? Any questions from legislators? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, 4.
4?
thank you for your work. Thank you for your partnership. We
Thank you.
appreciate that. We certainly appreciate the Deal Center. As you, let's slip back over to your metrics for evaluating the screeners. I understand that the State Board of Education, and maybe Superintendent Woods could enlighten us on this. How many did the State Board choose to make available for use as a screener? So of the 16 or so you evaluated, did they select a smaller number?
These were the ones selected. There was a larger number that I assume.
So there were 16 options for local school systems to choose?
Correct.
Screener?
Correct. And it's my understanding that next week the State Board of Education will be taking up the notion of reducing that list, but I'm not sure to what extent that will be.
Superintendent, can you help us understand that process, please? Because I think I agree with the chairman that 16 is a lot, and we won't be able to do comparative analysis if we have that large number of screeners. I also understand from your presentation, Superintendent, that you're working toward an available screener that would be a no-cost option to our school system. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
All right, so let's start with how many is a good number and how many is too many?
Well, again, based on what was given to us in the legislation, we were tasked with providing, screeners with minimum qualifications. We did, we fulfilled the law itself. Again, in discussion with the Board of Education, we looked, of course, we know the Deal Center provided, the, I guess, ranking, if you want to call it that. I think that as we continue to move forward, for any school district that's looking at this information, if they're looking at what's a screener that I have, well, I don't know that anyone would say I'm going to pick somebody from necessarily the bottom. That doesn't make sense. Because you want the best quality that's looking at that. I think as you look at some of this, again, as you heard from the Deal Center, some of the comparability can be a little bit stretched. A couple of cases I looked, there are a couple of the screeners that are listed in moderate, okay, but what you'll find out is that they're used in places like Mississippi and other individuals who, again, have been at the forefront. So, I think it is trying to look at comparability. As stated, we are having discussions with the Board of Education to see if this number, can be at least reduced down. And I think that, we'll continue to look at that. I think it's just trying to find information. But, to your point, we are looking at providing a high quality, screener that's out there for every district. In my expectation, it would be the best screener that's out there. That is what, I've charged the ERC and our assessment team with that. But sure, we're going to be looking at this in this upcoming board meeting.
I assume, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I assume there's a differential cost between screeners, so that if a school system elected screener A, it would cost some number of dollars, screener B would have a different number. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes, sir.
So there'll be a pretty strong desire to get a low-cost screener that might not necessarily serve the needs of our children.
Well, I think that, once again, you've got to look at prioritization. If it's important to you, and again, we know that it is important to each and every one of you, and again, the message is coming very loud and clear, you want to get the best that you possibly can look at that. We have looked at, again, trying to say, is this something that can be helped or funded by the legislator? You talked about legislative requests. That, again, is something that could come into being there.
Not for 16. I'm
Well,
just saying not for all,
yeah.
16 options.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but you're talking about cost.
I'm talking
So,
about quality.
yeah, well, cost and, I
I'm talking
mean,
about value.
yeah, but you mentioned cost and, if I'm chasing something, but if I don't have the money, where do I want to find the money? So I think that's, just trying to look at that, but we're working to nail that down, and, once again, Senator, I look at this, and if I'm the one, superintendent on the local board, making this decision, again, to your point, what's the quality? Now, looking at accountability, when we come back and we start to evaluate the school districts, we're going to have to look at what screener did you choose? Is it, viable? Is it, comparable?
But with so many different screeners, you won't be able to compare district over district. It's going to be very difficult. Do any states choose to utilize a single approach, a single option?
Carolina.
North Carolina, and just our friends in Mississippi, because they seem to be a national leader in this. Do they have multiple screeners?
Yes, sir.
They do? And how many do they
I
utilize, do you
think
know?
either 6 or 8.
So there's six, okay.
yeah.
And Florida, any insights? Do they?
I'm not aware.
Not
Yeah.
aware? Okay. Again, this is a key component of what you're doing, and we certainly support the concept of a screener so we'll know where we are. But I do think we have to try to narrow it down to a more realistic number. I certainly like the option of developing a standardized process, although I realize that I want to also provide a local jurisdiction and local boards of education to have some insights and some.
Yes, sir. All right, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Oh, Representative Ballard. Yeah, Representative Ballard. Yes, ma'am. I don't know how you do that one now. W1, what does that mean? Oh, okay. wait. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out to the committee that the original House Bill 538 had a very robust literacy coaching component to it. And a lot of the groups who had interest in the bill were kind of opposed to that. So in the fight to get 538 over the finish line last year, I ended up taking out that literacy coaching component just so we could get it over the finish line, because there was so much opposition to that from various groups. And I just wanted to make, just so that y'all kind of know the whole story of that.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the input, and I thank you for that. Why was there such strong opposition to a coaching component?
I think it was financial primarily.
Was that, if I could, was that pushback from Georgia-based educators, or was it external individuals, or was it, what sphere did the concern come from?
All of that.
All of the above?
Yeah.
Do you have a,
That is so pitiful, isn't it?
yes.
So sad.
Do you have perhaps a proposal on the table to recommend that?
Well, I haven't as yet, but we could always do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ripton.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, please.
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you for saying that. Just to put this up on the screeners and that, once again, we provided information, and we're going to rely on the Deal Center, that they're the experts in this area. They put it together. If they can narrow this down to say what's the top one, top two, then we are more than happy to provide that information to the State Board of Education. So we're, continuing to look at that with this list, and if they could help us out, we would appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. As y'all know, y'all can tell there's a lot of interest in this stuff, and there's a lot of concern, a lot of sincerity, and a lot of people that want to help you, and a lot of people going to make sure it gets done correctly. And I think a lot of the people are in this room today. So thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Introduce the next one. Introduce that one. Yeah.
Our next speaker is Matt Smith, and he's our final speaker today, if anybody was curious.
Nothing to stand between me and home.
Just had to add a little levity to the room.
Yeah, I was told I have about 30 seconds.
Nobody can leave the room. Don't leave the room. Don't leave the room.
We get the next slide.
Pot of coffee in the back room, if anybody.
There are only 2 slides. So
Hey,
hey,
first one.
most popular guy in the at the lectern. Yep. Well, I'd like to thank Chairman Dixon and Hickman for inviting me today and presenting the 20th edition of our top 10 issues to watch. One thing that you'll be happy to know is that literacy was one of the themes and issues that we did cover in the top 10. So I hope that relevancy allows you to dive into the other 9 issues that we have covered in this particular issue. I do want to point out and thank Senator O'Rourke for distributing the top 10 to the members of the Senate. And we're working on the other side so that the House will also get this valuable free copy of our publication. So before I dive in, I wanted to let you know, and if we could move to the next slide. Oh, I see. Great. Okay. Oh, wow, okay. You have a left and a right, but not an up and down. Oh, there we go. Great. So I wanted to indicate that these aren't in a priority order, but they're in a particular order, and that's kind of a nuance I want to cover real quick. Our first issue that we cover is usually the tone-setting one, and so we've identified two different areas, divisive rhetoric and political polarization, especially at the community level in school boards and whatnot, where we're seeing that there is an opportunity to kind of reshape mindsets among students, parents, and educators to figure out how we can really adopt a more strategic approach to district and school improvement. And so that's going to play out in the subsequent 9 issues. You'll see, like we did last year, though, that we have kind of chunked issues, if you will. And so the first or issues 2 through 4, rather, are ones that are really in the zeitgeist, really high up on the legislative agenda. You'll see literacy, of course, and the work that Representative Ballard and others, Senator Hickman had championed last year. So literacy, we talked through some of the issues around implementation, funding, coaches, and those things. And so I hope that you read that pretty closely. We offer some recommendations there. Several members also mentioned student mental health. That's definitely high up on our agenda, as well as access to quality childcare and how that affects workforce participation, especially for our parents. Each one of these 3, though, is so fundamental, not just to education, but to economic and workforce development. And as an organization, Georgia Partnership does think about how we can wed all 3 of those together to really produce the most robust school and community partnerships. Issues 5 through 7 are what we call our people-centered approaches. You'll see, for instance, that issue 5, we focus on what's important in terms of making sure that what is offered in high schools related to CTAE programs and pathways aligns with our community and state workforce needs. And so that's one that's also just as well could have been included in that first category. This is definitely high up on the list as well. Thinking of Senator Brass, Senator Parent, very much championing these ideas around career pathways and dual enrollment. The 6th issue is also important. We kind of think of a novel spin on educator recruitment and preparation, kind of flipping the model where we might have districts providing professional learning and induction supports before teachers even become employed in their districts. And so that's kind of an interesting approach that others, including Excel and Ed, have looked at as well. And so we wanted to point that out. Of course, one that we haven't pointed out in previous generations of the top 10 is how difficult it is to be a district superintendent right now, how they're struggling to meet the roles and expectations that have been placed on them, especially in the last 4 years with the pandemic. Our last 3, and I think I probably have about 10 seconds left, those 3 are around how we can kind of be resilient and kind of what we call future-proofing, making sure that our systems at the state level, as well as our districts and communities, are resilient and they're robust and that they can weather a storm. Might be an actual storm, or it could be something like a pandemic or a public health crisis. And so issue 8, the funding cliff, we focus mostly on K-12 school districts, and that's been most of the focus of the legislature, but we also wanted to highlight that there have been similar funding cliffs for early care and learning and higher ed as well. And so we wanted to play that up as well. Issue 9, we're not just paying lip service to this. The idea that our corporate and civic leaders in a community can be more well-connected in terms of delivery of post-secondary training, whether that's something that's delivered in a high school, a technical college, a university, or one that we don't often talk about, even in workplaces where we can have incumbent worker training for existing employees. And our final one, I promise there won't be any math, but the final one is a capstone of sorts where we're saying if we are going to reach kind of an economic competitiveness goal to make sure that Georgia continues to be the #1 state to do business for, I guess it would be 25 straight years by that point, the idea would be that we would need to increase the number of post-secondary credentials earned by our residents by at least 1.25 million credentials. And again, to be clear, we're not just talking about associate and 4-year degrees. We're talking about occupational licenses, apprenticeships. We're also talking about certificates and certifications that can be earned in anywhere from 3 to 18 months. And so So some of them might be having relative quality or maybe relative rigor or relative wage benefit in the workforce, but we can talk with y'all offline about that. So that's my 3 or 4 minute spiel. I know that we might not have enough time for questions, so I do have my cards, and I can distribute them to the committee, and they can ask us any questions about anything that we've highlighted in this issue.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate it. Dana Rickman is the one that reached out to me about this. We really appreciate y'all coming and presenting. I will give a shout out to the Georgia College and State University. The study I've seen is they are the only school or college in the state of Georgia that has received an A rating for teaching teachers how to teach children to read. A+. So we're very proud of y'all. We're very proud that y'all were here today.
By a former colleague from the House.
Oh, that's right. Well, again. So, y'all, thank y'all so much. I know it's Friday afternoon, but you can't imagine what this means for the state of Georgia, for all y'all to be in this room today and hear this. And Richard, thank you for the Department of Education for coming, and Amy, wherever you are, thank you so much. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see the legislators back here bright and early Monday morning.